Welcome to Empathy Stories, where every tale we share dives deep into the beauty of human connections, love, and redemption. Today's story is one of second chances. A journey of a man rediscovering love and family after years of mistakes. Stay with us as we unravel this moving and heartfelt narrative. Ethan Chandler stood in his luxurious penthouse overlooking the bustling streets of New York City. The skyline glittered with lights, a reflection of the success he had meticulously built over the years. At 39, he was a man who seemingly had it all: wealth, power, and a fiancée, Charlotte Monroe, whose beauty and social standing complemented his ambitions perfectly. The wedding of the season was just weeks away, and every detail was being executed with precision and grandeur. But as Ethan stared out at the city, a flicker of unease crossed his face. His assistant, Natalie, interrupted his thoughts with a stack of documents. "Mr. Chandler, the wedding planner needs your final approval on the guest list," she said, her voice polished and professional. Ethan nodded absently, his mind elsewhere. He thumbed through the list until he came across a name he had scribbled in the margins earlier that morning: Madison Reed. Madison. The name brought a wave of memories he had buried beneath years of relentless work. They had been inseparable once, during their college days at Columbia University. She had been the bright, driven journalism student, and he the ambitious business major. They were young and deeply in love. But their paths diverged when Ethan accepted a high-profile internship in London, prioritizing his career over their relationship. "Add Madison Reed to the guest list," Ethan instructed Natalie. Natalie hesitated. "Are you sure? I believe the final count is already at capacity." "Make room," he replied firmly. Later that evening, Ethan sat alone in his office, holding a photograph he hadn't looked at in years. It was of him and Madison during their last summer together. They were smiling, carefree, and oblivious to the decisions that would tear them apart. His thumb brushed over the image, and a hint of regret surfaced. Why had he added her name? Was it curiosity? Nostalgia? Or something deeper? When Charlotte called to discuss last-minute wedding details, Ethan mentioned Madison's name casually, testing the waters. Her response was sharp. "Your ex-girlfriend?" "Ethan, what possible reason could you have for inviting her?" Charlotte's voice was controlled but edged with suspicion. "It's nothing," Ethan assured her. "Just thought it would be polite." Charlotte laughed coldly. "Polite? Or are you trying to prove something?" Her words stayed with Ethan long after the call ended. Perhaps he was trying to prove something, not to Madison, but to himself. He wanted her to see the man he had become, to validate that the sacrifices he made all those years ago had been worth it. The days leading up to the wedding were a whirlwind of meetings, tastings, and fittings. Ethan threw himself into the preparations. But Madison's RSVP weighed on his mind. When Natalie informed him that Madison had confirmed her attendance, along with a +1, Ethan's heart skipped a beat. A boy. Madison was bringing a boy. The thought lingered in Ethan's mind, growing like an unwelcome storm cloud. Natalie's research revealed the boy's name: Liam Reed. Age 8. The timeline didn't make sense. Yet Ethan couldn't shake the strange unease that settled in his chest. The wedding day arrived, and the Boston Plaza Hotel was transformed into a vision of opulence. Blue orchids cascaded from the ceiling, and every detail screamed perfection. Ethan stood at the top of the grand staircase, scanning the sea of guests. Then he saw her. Madison. She entered the ballroom with quiet grace, wearing a simple but elegant dress that contrasted sharply with the extravagance around her. And by her side was Liam, A young boy with striking features, a face that mirrored Ethan's own. Ethan's breath caught. His heart pounded as Madison's eyes met his across the room. She gave a polite nod. But there was something guarded in her expression. Liam, oblivious to the tension, clutched his mother's hand and stared curiously at the grand surroundings. As the ceremony drew nearer, Ethan couldn't focus. His mind raced with questions. Who was this boy? Could it be possible? When Madison approached him during a quiet moment, her voice was steady but tinged with emotion. "Hello, Ethan," she said simply. "Madison," he replied, struggling to keep his composure. His gaze shifted to Liam. "And this is Liam," she said, her tone calm yet firm. "Your son." The revelation hit Ethan like a thunderbolt. For a moment, the world around him seemed to blur. His carefully curated life, his meticulously planned future, everything he had built was suddenly shaken to its core. In that moment, Ethan realized the past he had tried so hard to bury was not only alive but standing right in front of him, demanding to be acknowledged. Ethan stared at Madison, his mind spinning, his carefully composed exterior faltering. The noise of the wedding preparations, the murmurs of guests mingling, and the grandeur of the Boston Plaza Hotel faded into the background. His gaze darted to Liam, the boy who stood quietly, holding Madison's hand. The resemblance was undeniable: Liam's sharp jawline, piercing green eyes, and even the way he furrowed his brow in curiosity. He was Ethan's mirror image, condensed into a child. "Is this some kind of joke?" Ethan finally asked, his voice low but trembling. Madison's expression was unyielding, her eyes steady. "I would never joke about something like this. Ethan, he's your son." Ethan's mouth opened and closed, but no words came. His hands clenched into fists at his sides, frustration and disbelief churning within him. He glanced at Liam again, who stood there, wide-eyed, looking up at him with innocent curiosity. The boy's gaze was unnervingly familiar, like looking into a reflection of his younger self. "Why didn't you tell me?" Ethan demanded, his voice sharper now, tinged with anger and disbelief. "I tried," Madison replied calmly, though her voice carried an undertone of pain. "I sent emails. I left messages at your office. I reached out after that night. But you never answered. You were too busy building your empire in London. Weren't you?" Ethan's heart sank as he heard the accusation. But he couldn't deny it. He remembered that night 8 years ago, a fleeting reunion at a bar during a brief visit to Boston for a board meeting. It had been a single night filled with rekindled emotions and unresolved feelings. But he had left the next morning without a word, burying himself in his career once more. 8 years, he said softly, almost to himself. "I've missed 8 years of his life." Madison's voice softened. "I didn't come here to ruin your wedding, Ethan." Liam started asking questions about his father, questions I couldn't answer on my own anymore. "He wanted to meet you. He deserves to know who you are." Ethan turned away, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair, now feeling out of place. He gazed out the window, the Boston skyline glittering like a taunt to his accomplishments. All the wealth and power he had accumulated suddenly felt hollow. He had always believed his sacrifices were worth it. But standing here, facing Madison and the son he never knew he had, he wasn't so sure anymore. "I don't know how to do this," Ethan admitted, his voice raw with vulnerability. "I don't know how to be a father." "You don't have to figure it all out today," Madison said, stepping closer, her tone gentler now. "But you do have to decide if you want to try." Liam is an incredible boy. Ethan. He's smart, curious, and kind. But he needs you. He needs to know where he came from. And that's a choice only you can make. Ethan turned back to face her, his jaw tightening as a storm of emotion surged within him. His carefully crafted life was unraveling before his eyes. He thought of Charlotte, the wedding, the press, and the countless guests downstairs. But more than that, he thought of Liam, the boy who was staring at him now, clutching his mother's hand with quiet patience. This wasn't about business deals or social expectations. This was about something deeper, something real. Before Ethan could respond, Charlotte appeared in the doorway. She was radiant in her silk robe, her makeup flawless, but the fire in her eyes betrayed her simmering anger. "I saw the confirmation list," she said, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "Tiffany Collins is really here. And she brought a child. A child who looks just like you." Ethan's heart sank. He had hoped to address this privately, but there was no escaping it now. Charlotte's gaze shifted to Madison, then to Liam, and the realization dawned on her face. "You've been hiding this from me?" Charlotte spat, her voice rising. "Is this your son? Ethan? Is he?" Ethan hesitated, glancing at Liam before answering. "Yes, he is." The silence that followed was deafening. Charlotte stared at him, her green eyes filling with a mix of betrayal and fury. "You humiliate me like this? At our wedding? In front of everyone? How dare you?" "Charlotte, I didn't know about him," Ethan said, his voice firm but tinged with regret. "Not until today." "Not until today," she repeated bitterly, shaking her head. "Do you even hear yourself? You're about to marry me, Ethan. And this is what you spring on me." Madison stepped forward, her voice calm but resolute. "Charlotte, I didn't come here to disrupt your wedding. This isn't about you or your plans. This is about Liam." Charlotte glared at her. "How noble of you. But this isn't your wedding to ruin. Is it?" "Enough." Ethan's voice cut through the escalating tension. He looked at Charlotte, his tone measured but commanding. "This isn't just about us anymore. This is about my son." Charlotte stared at him, her anger giving way to a cold, calculating expression. "If you walk away from this wedding, Ethan, don't expect me to be here when you come back." Ethan's chest tightened as her words echoed in his mind. He glanced at Madison, then at Liam, who was now looking down at his shoes, visibly uncomfortable with the conflict. For the first time in his life, Ethan felt the weight of a decision that wasn't about business, success, or appearances. It was about love, responsibility, and doing what was right. "I'm sorry, Charlotte," Ethan said softly, "but I can't walk away from him." Charlotte's eyes widened in shock, then narrowed with icy disdain. "You'll regret this, Ethan. Mark my words." With that, she stormed out, leaving Ethan alone with Madison and Liam. The boy looked up at him, his innocent face filled with confusion and hope. "Are you really my dad?" Liam asked, his voice small but steady. Ethan knelt down, meeting Liam's eyes at his level. "Yes, Liam," he said, his voice breaking with emotion. "I'm your dad. And I want to get to know you. If you'll let me." Liam hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Okay." As the boy gave a shy smile, Ethan felt something shift within him. For the first time in years, He felt something real, something worth fighting for. Ethan stood by the window of his penthouse that evening, staring out at the Boston skyline. The glittering lights of the city, which had once symbolized his triumphs, now seemed hollow and distant. His thoughts were consumed by the image of Liam, his son, his own flesh and blood. The boy's quiet strength, his curious eyes, and the way he looked at Ethan with hesitant hope stirred something deep within him. He had made his decision, but the weight of it was only beginning to settle. Charlotte's parting words echoed in his mind, a reminder of the life he had left behind in choosing a future he barely understood. The soft chime of the elevator interrupted his thoughts. Ethan turned as Madison and Liam stepped into the living room. Madison's expression was wary, her guard still up. But Liam's face was alight with curiosity as he took in the sleek, modern space. "This place is huge," Liam said, his voice tinged with awe. Ethan managed a small smile. "I guess it is." Liam wandered over to the floor-to-ceiling windows, pressing his hands against the glass. "You can see everything from up here." Ethan walked over and knelt beside him. "You like it?" Liam nodded. "It's cool. But it feels lonely." The words hit Ethan harder than he expected. He glanced at Madison, who was standing by the door, her arms crossed protectively. She gave him a look that was both understanding and cautious, as if to say, "This is your moment, don't mess it up." "Liam," Ethan said softly, "I know this is all new and probably really confusing, but I want you to know that I'm here now. And I'm going to try my best to make this right for both of you." Madison stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "Ethan, it's not just about saying the right words. Liam needs more than promises. He needs to see that you mean it." "I know," Ethan replied, meeting her gaze. "I'm not asking for forgiveness or trust overnight. I just want the chance to earn it." Liam turned to face them, his small frame silhouetted against the city lights. "Do you like stars?" he asked suddenly, breaking the tension. Ethan blinked, caught off guard by the question. "Stars?" "Yeah," Liam said, his face lighting up. "I love them. Mom got me a telescope for my birthday last year. I use it all the time to look at the constellations." Ethan glanced at Madison, who smiled faintly. "He's been obsessed with astronomy since he was 5, she explained. He could name all the planets before he could tie his shoes." Liam beamed with pride. "I can show you, if you want. I brought my telescope in the car." Ethan felt a lump rise in his throat. "I'd love that." Liam. Later that night, the three of them stood on the balcony, wrapped in coats against the crisp autumn air. Liam had set up his telescope, his small hands expertly adjusting the settings as he explained the constellations with enthusiasm. Ethan listened intently, asking questions and marveling at his son's knowledge. "That's Orion," Liam said, pointing through the lens. "And over there, that's Taurus. If you look closely, you can see the Pleiades cluster." Ethan leaned down to look through the telescope, his breath catching at the sight of the stars. It had been years since he had taken a moment to simply gaze at the night sky. For so long, his life had been consumed by boardrooms, deals, and deadlines. Now, standing here with Liam and Madison, he felt an unfamiliar but welcome sense of peace. "You're amazing, Liam," Ethan said, his voice filled with genuine admiration. "You know so much about this." Liam's cheeks flushed with pride. "Thanks, Dad." The word Dad hung in the air, and Ethan felt his heart swell. He glanced at Madison, who was watching them with a soft smile. For the first time, he felt like he was beginning to understand what it meant to be part of something bigger than himself. In the weeks that followed, Ethan began to take small but meaningful steps toward rebuilding his relationship with Liam. He rearranged his work schedule to make time for school drop-offs, baseball games, and science projects. He traded late-night board meetings for movie nights and dinners at Madison's modest home in Cambridge. It wasn't easy. There were moments of awkwardness. Moments when Liam's questions about the past left Ethan fumbling for answers. But there were also moments of joy, like the first time Liam hugged him goodnight. Or when Madison let her guard down long enough to laugh at one of his jokes. One evening, as they sat around the dinner table, Liam looked up from his plate with a serious expression. "Mom, can Dad come to my science fair next week?" Madison hesitated, her eyes flicking to Ethan. "That's up to your dad," she said gently. Ethan nodded immediately. "I wouldn't miss it for the world." Liam grinned, his face lighting up with excitement. "It's going to be so cool. I'm building a model of the solar system. And I even have a section about black holes." "That sounds incredible," Ethan said, his chest swelling with pride. "Maybe you can teach me a thing or two." Madison watched the interaction, her heart softening. For all her reservations, she couldn't deny that Ethan was trying. He wasn't the same man who had walked out of her life 8 years ago. He was different now, more present, more grounded. As she cleared the dishes, Ethan joined her in the kitchen. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" Madison asked, surprised. "For giving me this chance," he replied, his voice earnest. "For letting me be here. With him. With you." Madison studied him for a long moment, her defenses slowly crumbling. "You're doing a good job, Ethan. Liam's happy. And that's what matters most." Ethan smiled, his heart lighter than it had been in years. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey here at Empathy Stories. We hope this tale of love, forgiveness, and rebuilding family touched your heart as much as it did ours. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us continue bringing you stories that inspire and connect us all. See you in the next video, where another tale of empathy awaits to brighten your day.